Welcome to Pro Audio Profiles. My name is Brendan Decora, and each week I'll be hosting different guests, mainly engineers and producers, but also people from across the industry. Enjoy. On today's show, we have Clint Welander. He has credits with Jimmy Cliff, the Avalanches, DJ Khaled, and Rancid. Enjoy. First and foremost, I want to thank you for being here. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on.
Of course. I like to start by going over your backstory, your history, if you want to share kind of how you got to where you are, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I guess it's kind of a long story. But
feel free. Like, we could go on for 15 minutes if you want.
Sure.
No problem.
Yeah. Well, I'll start from the beginning.
Yeah.
I think I just have always been kind of obsessed with recording things and music. When I was a kid, I used to make radio shows with my friend in my bedroom. I just had like a cassette player that I realized it had a built-in mic one day. And so we just hit record and we'd do little skits, like comedy skits, or we'd like sing or whatever. And then, so that was, I don't know, I was probably like 9 years old or something.
Right.
And then, I think I saw the movie Home Alone 2, and he had this little thing called a Talk Boy, which was like this little cassette recorder, and it had a pitch fader on it, and it had like a backward switch.
Right.
And so I think I begged my parents for that for Christmas, and I got that, and then it was on because I could talk into that, and I could change my voice and play it back, and I would just sit with that for hours. And
that's awesome.
Yeah, so I kind of really loved recording myself when I was a kid, and then when the school that I went to in Iowa, it's just like a small town, and so they were very obsessed with sports. And so they just got me into sports, and I kind of forgot about music. I always loved music, but I forgot about doing it. I took piano lessons and drum lessons for a while, but it was more like all about sports until I got out of high school. And then, I don't know, I think I was like a junior in high school, and I sort of got back into music, and I really loved hip hop. And so I got into DJing, and from there, I got into beat making, very rudimentary stuff. And then my friend Matt loved rapping, and so he was rapping over my beats. And I started recording him very simply into this HP computer and a Radio Shack mic and some really bad software called Cakewalk.
Right.
That was it's like a Pro Tools for beginners.
It's still around.
Yeah, and so. That's how I started. So that would have been, just out of high school, just getting into college. I went to college at University of Iowa.
Okay.
And so my friend Matt went to a community college that was near there. So at the time, I was still making beats for him and then recording him. And then he ended up moving out of town, and I was still kind of obsessed with recording stuff. So I actually got a degree in business management from U Iowa, but I started taking classes in the music building while I was there. And so luckily they just had offered this class called, Introductory to Music Recording 101 or something like that. And so I saw a sign on a door when I was walking around the music building for that. And so I signed up, and it ended up being just me and one other kid that signed up.
Oh, wow.
So it was me and Tommy, and the instructor was the engineer for the music building. His name was Joel. And so we got really good hands-on, pretty much one-on-one training from Joel. And he kind of taught us the right way to do stuff right away. Right. So we learned how to do Pro Tools right away. And the music building had this kind of central control room that connected to all the concert halls in there. You could video in there. And they had this old broadcast Neve in there.
Right. Nice.
So he showed us a lot of the basic stuff right away and taught us the right thing to do. So I started working a little bit in the music building for him, helping record some of the concerts and ensembles and stuff. And then when I graduated, I just kind of felt like, okay, I'm very passionate about this. This is what I want to do. Right. What do I do next? And Joel said, well, you should probably go check out this other school called Conservatory of Recording Arts.
Right.
So I went there. It's in Phoenix.
Nice. That's where I went to.
Yeah. So I went there. It's like a year long or a little less, and really learned a lot. You know, they really teach you kind of like, this is what the industry is going to be like. You know, be prepared for this. Be prepared to be a runner. You know, you don't get to just jump in and do what you want to do right away. Right. You got to go through the system. So that was really good. And then they kind of just let you use the studio as much as you want. Like you just go in there all night if you want. So I took advantage of that, and then eventually moved to LA from there with like 5 or 6 other dudes that went to the school with me. You know, we all went to.
Wait a minute. So when I was there, I was planning on moving back home. Yeah. And, you know, my whole family had moved away from my hometown, and so I had kind of nothing to go back to. And it was kind of a smaller town. And it's like, well, I could bite the bullet and go to LA where all the big studios are, or, you know, I don't know what, go back home to nothing. Yeah. And so I'm wondering, did you always have the plan of coming to LA after, or how did that work out?
Not really. It was just kind of like, when we were in school, they were like, okay, these are the cities you can go to where there's going to be the industry. You can go to Atlanta, you can go to Nashville, you can go to New York, or you can go to LA. Yeah. And we were in Phoenix, and we're like, well, we can drive to LA. Yeah. And we can all go together and go in on a place. Right. So that was kind of like the cheapest, most
exactly what I did.
sensible option, you know? Yeah. And so we just all drove out, I think, one weekend before, and we drove around, and we were just kind of like, you know, a little bit like blurry-eyed, like, whoa, this place is huge, and like we're lost. And you know, we found a place in the valley. We rented this house in Van Nuys, and you know, it was a good place to start out, and you know, it was cheap enough for all of us to, because we all shared on the place, and we got our feet wet. I think almost everybody ended up moving out of town except for me and one other guy. Right. So, you know, it was kind of a cool little place to start out, and we like built a little studio in the house, and you know.
Nice. So then you did your internship. Where did you start out at studios?
Oh yeah, so I did an internship at this place called Studio Atlantis.
Really? So did I.
You did? Oh, cool. Yeah. So you know about that. So it was like it's like a pop hip hop studio, and I thought that's what I wanted to. That's like the area of music I wanted to be in, because I really love that music, and I like making beats. And but then when I started interning there, I started to realize like it wasn't exactly what I wanted, because like they mostly just record vocals all the time, and they work in the middle of the night, and it's very like heavy on the industry side, where there's like just a lot of extra people around, you know? And also it just seemed like that studio had so many interns that it was like I had very little chance of ever like moving up the ladder. Right. And so I just started going around LA, just trying to find a actual gig. Yeah. And so I just throwing out resumes everywhere, and I had already sent one to Sunset Sound while I was at the conservatory, and they just hit me up one day like, hey, we need a runner at the Sound Factory, you know, are you interested? And I was like, yeah. They're like, when can you start? I'm like, all right, tomorrow. I just showed up the next day, and I was ready. So I started at the Sound Factory as the runner. That was my first paid gig. Okay. Yeah, and I was there for 2.5 years as a runner until I became the assistant finally. And, you know, then from there I just learned so much.
Right. So is it, I know Sunset, you know, there's the Sound Factory and then Sunset Sound. Yeah. When you're staff there, were you only at the Sound Factory, or was it both facilities?
So it was kind of like, at the time they had Sound Factory, and so they had 2 rooms at Sound Factory. Right. And then the 3 at Sunset. So basically, like when you were assistant at the time, you kind of got a room. So I was like the Studio A at Sound Factory guy. Right. And then sometimes I would do Studio B at Sound Factory if, you know, the producer that was in there wanted me, or if the scheduling worked that way. And then occasionally they would need somebody at Sunset Sound to fill in. And so then they would ask me to do that. Okay. But mostly I was at Sound Factory for probably about 5 or 6 years. Yeah. Assisting, and then I got into engineering a little bit, and then they sold it.
Right.
And so then I was kind of like, I didn't have a spot because there was other guys at Sunset Sound.
Right.
And so I started to kind of float around freelance a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But then eventually one of the people that was at Sunset left, and then I was the first person they called.
Right.
So then I got back in and started assisting
Nice.
over there. And
Okay.
so then I've been there since probably like 2015, I think, something like that. So,
and nowadays, are you doing more engineering, production, mixing stuff?
Yeah, I think mostly engineering, occasionally assisting, and then mixing when I can.
Yeah.
When I can convince people to let me mix. You know how hard
Nice.
that is sometimes. Because either they want an all-star or they think it's good to have different people mix it and record it.
Yeah. It varies. I mean, I've been doing a lot of mixing lately, but I've also done a lot of projects where I, will do the whole thing, you know.
Yeah,
So,
that's what I like to do if I can. Because I try to start mixing when I start recording.
Exactly.
Just try to carve it up so I don't have to work so hard and I can be more creative when I get to the mix.
Right.
And so then if I do that and then it goes to someone else, then sometimes it doesn't go the direction I thought it was going to go,
Exactly.
So, but it is fun to sometimes get stuff back that sounds like way different and cool in a whole different way.
Right.
And it's fun to get things to mix that came from somewhere else.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
And you can totally do your thing and take it a direction. And,
So mostly it's mixing and engineering these days.
Okay.
Yeah.
So one of the things I like to talk about a lot on the show is actually how to get great results from artists in the studio. Is there... have you ever been in a situation where an artist felt super vulnerable, and how did you handle that?
Let's see. Yeah, I think I've definitely been in those situations. And so, part of it is making them feel really comfortable where they're at, and they feel like with the setup you do, they can get the best results, and there's nothing they're missing. And another big part of it is just, talking to them beforehand, talking them through it, and building up their confidence a little bit, you know, because sometimes they just don't know they have it in them, and so it's good to be able to say like, hey, this is how good you are. You just don't even know it yet.
Right.
And talk to them about that beforehand, so they don't get in there and get in their headphones and get in their head, and then they sort of like lose their confidence. Because very early on, I realized how easily an artist can lose their confidence. And once that's done, it's kind of like the whole session's blown unless you can talk them back into it.
Right. Well, I mean, being an artist is, in the studio especially, you're very vulnerable. It's like you're exposing your heart and soul and trying to, put your passion into it. So it's a very vulnerable place.
Yeah, especially with a new artist.
Right.
Because we do sessions a lot of times with these like studio musicians that are like made of steel, and they're like unflappable, and so you kind of get used to that. And then when someone comes in that is very vulnerable, you got to remember like, okay, we got to take care of this person a little bit.
Right. We were actually talking a little bit before we started about like setting up studios to, kind of make it feel like a creative playground.
Yeah.
Obviously, with different budgets and different levels of clients, you can't always go to town like that for everyone. But how do you kind of work with that when you're trying to make it feel comfortable for artists?
Well, try to figure out what their favorite things are, and have that ready if you can. And then also really good headphone mix. If I can, and the artist is okay with it, I'll try to make it sound more like the record when they're singing or when they're playing, and that way they get a vibe to play to. And that's something that I think really helps out a lot, because then they have more of a picture of what their end result is going to be, instead of just kind of being in this space where like, okay, I did my performance and now I know you're just going to turn it into something, which is, I think, probably harder to, perform to than having something set where it's like, okay, this is the aesthetic we're going for, and so this is where you fit in.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it's like you said before. It's like you're sort of mixing as you're recording, to kind of get it as close as you can to inspire them.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to get people inspired and to keep people interested. Because I've also done lots of projects where it's like, okay, it's been requested by whoever that we just record it very flatly and very simply so that we can manipulate it later.
Right.
And that's okay. And I understand that workflow, but I think for the artist, it may be kind of like a little bit too sterile where they don't know what they're supposed to do exactly, because they can't hear where it's going to go.
Yeah, exactly. And, a lot of what we do is, quote unquote, reading the room. Yeah. But what do you do? How do you read the room when the energy feels off, when it feels like, something needs to be tweaked? What do you do in those cases?
Well, usually I'll try to do something to either, like, I'll take a break or I'll do something to just lighten the mood a little bit. Right. Like, try to just get people to have fun. Mm-hmm. It's really great at Sunset Sound. They have the basketball court.
Okay.
That's one of my biggest tricks, is just like, okay, let's just go shoot hoops for 5 minutes. And then all of a sudden people are like, forget about what they were doing and wherever they were, if they were in their head, and they just kind of shoot some hoops and have fun and smiling. And it seems like you always get a better take when people are having fun.
Right.
So Absolutely. Whatever it is, if it's just like telling jokes and taking a minute and get, to do that, or to like go out and get a little exercise, play a little basketball or whatever it is. And I think that helps a lot.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. And have you ever made a mistake that taught you a big lesson in the studio?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think early
Everyone
on.
Has.
I think early on, just probably just saying the wrong thing that sort of like accidentally broke down the confidence of the artist a little bit,
Right.
And I think that I learned, like, okay, these are the things you can't say, because you have to watch yourself a little bit, because it can easily like just like take a wrong turn, and then everyone's confidence is gone, and it's sort of just like this vacuum.
Right.
It feels really awkward.
Right.
So
now we go shoot some hoops.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So I've learned the things not to say, and then I've learned like what to do in those moments when the awkwardness does come.
Right.
Yeah.
And how do you tweak your techniques for different music styles and genres?
Yeah, that's something I definitely concentrate on when I do the setup. So somebody will tell me what type of artist it is. I'll try to listen to some of their old music, and then I'll ask them, like, what are you going for in this project? Mm-hmm. And then after that, I'll sort of design a setup based on what vision I have for the final mix or whatever the final production is going to be. And so a lot of it will just have to do with the setup. I'll choose different mics, a different studio, certain effects that I'll have going during the recording, and whatever layout they're in the room sometimes can make a difference. Whether
Absolutely.
They want to be in the same room together and they really want to feel each other,
of course,
or if they want to be separated, stuff like that. Yeah.
Awesome. And speaking of the artist's vision, is there, can you tell me about a time you really had to get out of your comfort zone to meet an artist's vision?
I think definitely there's been a lot of times where I've kind of done an extra setup for an artist because it'll get closer to their vision. And it's hard to to remember a specific time. Yeah. But I know that that's one thing that I do sometimes is like, okay, this is what the artist will say. This is kind of what I'm going for. And so I think I want to be in with the band, in the room with them, or I want to be in a booth, or I want to be singing an overdub after they're done. It's sort of, I guess it just depends on what they want, and that'll kind of dictate the workflow and like when they're comfortable, because some people are not comfortable singing and playing at the same time, and so then you'll want to capture one of those two performances, whether it's they're playing or they're singing with the band, hopefully, and they'll all sort of get their energy together. And then other times they'll just be able to sing and play and do it all at once. So I think those are the things where like it's important to notice which one is going to make them more comfortable.
Right.
Because if you say, "Oh, well, you have to sing and play," you know, or try to sing and play, and sometimes that just is too much. And
and I've even had artists where they can't sing and not play.
Yeah,
you know?
Same thing. Yeah,
It's
sometimes they have to sing and play. Yeah.
It's like I have to have a guitar in their hand or something.
Yeah, I did one session pretty recently where a lady was playing keys and singing, and she couldn't sing and play and sing by herself or play keys by herself and have those performances be as good. So she had to do them at the same time.
Right.
But we wanted to capture just the vocals, so we ended up just like putting a keyboard out that wasn't connected to anything so that she could play and then sing and still get the feeling of playing.
Totally.
Yeah.
Is there any techniques or approaches you use to bring out the best in a artist performance during a session?
Well, I think definitely try to have them having fun, enjoying what they're doing. I think joy brings a lot of good performance out.
Right.
And so, you know, scheduling it at the right time when they know, or when you know that they're going to be feeling right. Or also having some setup that they're very excited about. It's very easy in a studio that's nice, like East West or Sunset, where it's like, hey, I'm on hollowed ground and I'm singing into these mics that these legends have sang into, and like that already is like something that excites people.
It makes the job easier.
I think that stuff is very important. And I think when you're like in the home studio, it's a little bit harder because you don't have that nostalgia involved. But it's, I think keeping people comfortable and happy is a good start.
Yeah. And how do you, I mean, you mentioned working at those kind of places.
Yeah.
What do you do to, when you're working in like a B studio or some smaller place, you know?
I think just talking to people and trying to like make them feel good about their day, make them feel good where they're at, and just feel happy to be doing what we're doing, you know, and sort of like, not like, oh, this is a drag, we got to do this today, and like, you know, because I think, especially for music, it's really important. It's so tied to emotion that it's so important to get people in that space. Yeah, you know, for sure. And I think that one thing that's difficult for me sometimes is when people sing really sad songs. Yeah. Because I'm just like a very joyful person, and I'm lucky I had like a really good life. And so it's harder for me to relate to that. Yeah. But that's something that I'm trying to relate more to and talk to musicians about. I actually had one of my goals is to start like a artist retreat for artists so that they can, because I do a lot of yoga and meditation, and so I want to implement that into like my day with artists, and we can kind of start there and get people feeling really good and feeling like they're just having a great day and good about themselves, and then they're able to create easier, and also to be able to like talk about if they have any pain going on or sadness or anything like that, because I feel like a lot of artists, they put that into their music rather than talking about it, you know? And so there's like, I feel like there's room there for artists to actually talk about their feelings, and then once they go through that a little bit, then they can go in the studio and create, and maybe they'll create something else, you know, and they'll be able to unlock another area. So that's one thing that I'm working towards doing. I think eventually I'd like to be able to have like an artist retreat studio where I could take people, they could crash at the place and wake up and have yoga and coffee or whatever they want. And they can meditate in the yard and yeah, so hopefully one day I'll be doing that. Yeah.
And how do you keep up with new recording technologies and incorporate them into your work?
Man, it's tough. There's so much stuff going out there. It's like every day there's a new thing. But, you know, I just try to learn new stuff if I can, learn the new software, go through the aches and pains of learning stuff. Sometimes it's frustrating because like I already have a workflow and I want every workflow to be like that, and I have to just say, okay, this is not that, and there's going to be a little bit of a learning curve. So I go through a few weeks of learning a new software, and then I learn to love it. And So I try to stay up with it, but it's pretty intense. There's so much.
Yes.
And there's I could spend all day learning a new thing, like almost
Right.
every day.
Right.
So I try to pick the ones that I think are going to be important
Right.
and learn those, and then just keep learning them.
Yeah.
Keep pushing. Even though I want to just say, okay, we're good. I got everything I need. It's like, no, there's always going to be something new. So,
of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
I just want to take a quick break and tell you about my free snare guide. In it, I go over all my techniques, from drum choices, microphone placement, tuning, even mixing techniques. Check it out now at brendandecora.com/huge-snare. And now, back to the show. And you mentioned, the idea of the retreat studio.
Yeah.
Like, often in LA and a lot of other places, when you book a studio, you book 12 hours at a time.
Yeah.
So how do you help artists stay focused and motivated doing a long session like that? And would you do that in your place if you had that kind of place,
That's true, yeah. I think, ideally I would work less. I feel like you usually get, you can get 8 hours out of people, and then the last 4 hours can be a struggle depending on who you're working with. Some people can just blaze through.
Yeah.
Some people, they take a little while to warm up, and then you get the best at the end of the day. But
Right.
a lot of times it seems like you get through the 8 hours, you get a lot done, and then the last part of the day is like you're trying to struggle to get these last few things out, and sometimes it's really hard. You might as well wait till the next day.
Right.
So, yeah, I'll talk to people. We'll try to take like breaks enough to be able to kind of make it through those long days.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it helps a lot to do like some yoga or something that's going to be able to kind of energize me and my body. So I'm not like just been sitting at the console all day.
Right.
And I think for an artist that helps too. So I think doing that and pacing it out and having certain breaks is something that's good and could be good for the artist too, to be able to make it through a long day. So I think if it was my studio and it was an artist retreat, I would start off kind of slow in the morning, make that more about self-care, and then have a good mid-morning, midday session, and then take a break for a little while, do something else, whatever that may be, and then come back and have another session, and then try to be done around dinner time, and not have to go back in after dinner time, because that's kind of like, okay, that's the third time we're going back in. And everybody's pretty exhausted, and we're all thinking about, we got to do this tomorrow again. So, yeah, I think ideally I would space it out, but like when you're in a big studio, and you're paying top dollar for it. It's like, you want to get the most out of it. And so everybody's sort of pushed to that. And sometimes that can be a benefit, people, especially when you're in a big studio, the pressure of like, oh, we're spending all this money and we're on this hallowed ground really kind of can motivate people. So you got to sort of read the room. You got to read the artist, because sometimes they'll be motivated. Sometimes they'll be intimidated.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's tricky because, as we both know, there's artists all across the board, some people will have the money and budget to, just do setup days or weeks sometimes and just, go crazy with it so that they can, have everything set and be inspired and that kind of thing, you know? So it's like, how do you balance that? I know we already talked about this, but it's just interesting to see the different levels of setups and that kind of thing that people go to do that.
There are definitely different levels, and just like you said, like it just depends on the budget and what it takes to make people feel comfortable.
Right. Well, have you worked in? Have you gone to people's home studios and helped people at home? Because obviously that's a whole different scenario, because you're at your place, you're not worried about the budget or the time, you can just go to town. How do you approach it differently if you're going to someone's home studio?
I think it's definitely more relaxed.
Right.
The setup is a little bit more of a pain in the ass because you have to bring a bunch of stuff in most of the time and set it up.
Right.
And but it's more comfortable once you do get there because then they can just, okay, we're going to stop. We're going to make some coffee, or the kitchen's right there, and we're going to have lunch right here. And and then the fam's running around or something,
Right.
So that's kind of cool. And also it's sort of like easier, like you don't have to worry about the clock so much, so you can take a break and you can say, okay, we're done for today, let's come back tomorrow.
Right.
And so I think once you get it set up, it's a lot more relaxed if you're doing a home studio thing.
Right. Yeah. And when it comes to mixing, like how do you handle the varying quality of tracks that you receive?
Yeah, well, that's a big thing. It's like sometimes you get some stuff and you're kind of like, wow, this is not good. This is not very well recorded, or this performance is not good. And so, there's a couple ways you can go about it. You can try to fix it if that's what people want. You got to kind of figure it out if they want it to be fixed, or if they're okay with the way that it is, and they just want you to kind of enhance it and do the best you can with it. So I'll try to read the artist what they want, and also a big part of that is managing the expectations ahead of time, and seeing, okay, this is what you gave me, this is what we can do in this amount of time, or if you give me this much time, this is what we can do. Like, what are you trying to get out of it? And sort of gauge that before going in, because I'm sure you've been in the same situation where it's like you think you're gonna do one mix, but then you end up working on it for like weeks on end because you didn't realize the expectations were like way further than what you thought. Right. And so I try to gauge that right away, and then like based on that I'll say, okay, this is how much I'll do it for, or maybe we should just do it by the hour because we don't know how long it's going to take, so depending on the project I'll sort of gauge it, and then I'll give them an idea. Because I've been in situations where they're like, okay, I'll do it for like this much money, but then it ends up taking like way more time than I thought. And then if you like divvy that up by the hour, you'd be making like peanuts. So,
right.
So I sort of learned my lesson. And so now I'm like, okay, if I understand what they want, then I can give them a price for just a mix. But if I don't really know yet, I'll just say, okay, we'll just do it by the hour, the first few songs, and we'll see how long it takes.
Right. For sure. No, it can definitely be tricky. That's one of the biggest things when I work with clients is figuring out, like, the first question is, how much do you like your rough mix? Because it may not even be a great sounding rough mix, but if they love it, then they don't want it to change very much, then it's still like that can be okay. You can still
totally
take go with that. But then it's tricky, because if you don't know that, then it's like, oh, this is not a good mix, let me totally take it somewhere else, and then they're like, what the hell, this is not what I wanted. So it's definitely a fine line, for sure.
I've definitely learned in the last couple of years that to stop myself when mixing, because I've definitely taken it way too far. And then people are like, oh, what, take this stuff away, and then I realize, oh, like I shouldn't have spent those last like 3 hours on the mix. I should just stop. So now I've learned to like stop and just send it to them, and even if I don't think it's perfect, they'll give me their notes, and that's going to be way
sometimes you have
more
to,
informative than me trying to just like guess on it. So.
Yeah, exactly. And especially now that so much of the work is remote with mixing too, it's like you really don't have them in the room to say, oh, this isn't quite the direction. Let's, so that's all you can do, That's interesting. So what are some, I mean, if you can share, what are some current or recent projects that you've been working on?
So currently I'm kind of doing this ongoing project for this guy, Sergio, and it's just a passion project for him, and he's got a cool band. It's kind of like a 80s boogie kind of funk band, And so it's like drums and bass and guitar and a DJ and him. And so they're all kind of live, and it's sort of just an evolving project. It started as them jamming, and then they're sort of coming together with songs. So it's like they're just kind of this evolving project that hasn't, I don't know if they've really found their exact sound yet, but they're still searching for it. So it's kind of fun to be a part of something that's like emerging like that.
Yeah.
And then I've been doing lots of orchestral stuff, which is really fun.
Nice.
I think, that's why I sort of wanted to move to a different studio from a hip hop studio, is because, you get to record bands and you have like 10 different instruments, and you get to put up so many mics and really kind of craft a cool sound. And then the next level of that is sort of like, okay, now you get to do some orchestral thing.
Right.
So where you have all these really cool classical instruments. And so I've been working with this group called Wild Up Orchestra, and this producer, Louis Peskoff, on a bunch of different projects, mostly for this Julius Eastman. It's like a 3-volume series, I guess you could say. And so we've done 3 volumes, and I think we're still working on some new ones coming up soon. Nice. And so that's been really fun, just to record strings and brass and woodwinds and kind of orchestral percussion and get everybody in the room together. I think we packed like a 25-piece in Studio 2, which is a lot for that studio.
For that room,
I mean, that's a big room, but once you start getting the orchestra in there, it gets small really quick.
Yes.
And Ruckus was there. He was just kind of like weaving in and out of the cellos. And so that stuff's really fun.
Nice.
And so
I remember we worked together at Sunset one time, and you had the dog there. It was awesome.
Yeah,
honestly, that's a cool trick for inspiring the artist to keep people chill.
No, I know. Yeah, that's totally true. People love having Ruckus there. He's just like this little therapy guy. He's so chill.
Right.
And then in between takes, they come in and just hang with them. And, and then, people say, like, you got to bring Ruckus.
Right.
Don't leave him home.
Right.
So, that's true. That is good.
Nice.
It's good to have just any type of, like, thing that's a break where people's minds can get off of the music for a minute.
Yeah. Awesome. So I like to wrap up each podcast with the same few questions for everyone. The first one is, who has been your most influential teacher?
It's a good question. So many good teachers. Being an assistant at Sound Factory and Sunset Sound is like all these legends come through. And I think mostly it's probably the artist.
Okay.
I think there's been so many great engineers and producers I've learned from, and I think they're awesome. And the cool thing about that is, like, they all do it a different way.
Yes.
And it all sounds amazing.
Right.
And so that really made me learn, like, you don't have to do it the same way every time. You can do it a different way, and it's going to be cool. Like, so that gave me the freedom to, like, try different things. So I try to try a different thing every time.
Nice.
But most of the time, I think I learned the most from the artist. Especially, like, with mixing, I'll have a mix. I think it's perfect. And then they'll listen to it and be like, no, this is not even close. Like, this is what we wanted. And then they'll show me, and then at first I'll kind of begrudgingly be like, okay, like, I kind of get it. But then I let it sink in, and then I'm like, oh wow, like, that's something I never would have tried.
Right.
Right. And so they really enlightened me there. So I think I learned the most from the artist.
Yeah.
But I've learned this huge bag of tricks from all these producers and engineers out there. And just like, there's just like too many to even know who's the one that has taught me the most. But
awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. The next question is, if you go to a new studio, what's your favorite reference track? What do you put on to learn the room and all that?
Ooh, that's a good question. Well, there's a few different ones, I'll put on like a modern rap song, like Run the Jewels or something. Okay. It has like a big ass bass, so I can learn the low frequencies, and then I put on like some old classic track, like Lionel Richie, All Night Long. And just because that song is very dynamic and just like sort of pops out the speakers. Right. So that's fun to listen to in there too. And see, and then probably something with like some heavy guitars too, like a rock song.
Okay.
Like, I don't know, like Nirvana or something like that. Like, just so to be able to hear how those, guitars are sounding in the room.
Right.
Yeah.
Nice. Last question. What would be one tidbit you have for an upcoming engineer?
A tidbit. I think just wherever you end up at, just try to stick with it as long as you can. Because, I think that's what happened for me. Like, eventually, like, I had a great gig at Sound Factory, and that took a little bit for me to get the gig there because I was the runner, and I had to wait for an assistant to leave. And then, I sort of stuck around after Sound Factory got sold, floating around and just freelancing. And then eventually somebody left at Sunset, and then they called me to assist there.
Yeah.
And then I was just assisting for a long time. And then I started to get engineering gigs because a spot opened up, you know. And if I had just given up, I probably wouldn't have got so many opportunities. Or if I would have just said, okay, I'm going to do my own thing. I think it's very hard to get those opportunities if you're just doing your own thing in your home studio to get those type of clientele to come to you. But if you're at a big studio and you got a foot in the door, eventually those opportunities are going to come. You might have to wait a long time. It might be sort of frustrating, but I think that's something that's benefited me a lot, is just sticking around, because, eventually there's going to be a day where they're going to need you.
Exactly.
So, stick with it.
I definitely agree. Like, there's, as you even mentioned, like, most of your classmates originally don't even live here anymore. They totally left town. And I know, countless people that have come into the industry and worked as a runner for a little while and then given up and left, so that's a great tidbit, is to just stick it through and, you know.
Stick with it. It's going to be tough, and you're going to get frustrated, and you're going to get probably bored, and, but if you can, find a way to just like scrape by and those opportunities will come.
Absolutely.
But it takes a while.
Yeah, it can.
Yeah, it can. Sometimes you get lucky and you just hop on a train and you're there.
I've seen people get lucky too.
Yeah, but for most people, I think it's just like grinding it out.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Awesome.
It's great, dude.
Appreciate it.
I'm glad we did it.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for checking out the show. Make sure to subscribe for all the updates, and I'll see you next week.